Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. My name's Beth Cohen, and today we'll be looking back over what has happened in Catalonia in 2024 and summarising some of our top stories. "2024 has been a turbulent year on a global level, with ongoing armed conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, notable natural disasters such as the floods in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and on a political level, the US presidential election has dominated the headlines throughout the year. But today we'll be focusing on those stories which have been especially relevant to Catalonia. Joining me to reflect on some of the major events of 2024 and round up the year's news is Lorcan Doherty. Hello, Lorcan.
Hello, Beth.
It's great to be doing one of our final podcasts of the year together.
Yeah, it's great. I know holidays not too far away now.
Now, Lorcan, 2024 has been an exciting year on a local level, and we could do a whole series of podcasts on the events which have shaped our year. But could you give us a brief overview of some of the most important stories?
Yeah, well, we have had two elections. We had a drought and then floods. We had a new president. We have a new president. We also had an old president who came and went briefly. That was an interesting one, more on that. We've had lots of protests, farmers, anti-tourism protests, a big one over rent prices. And the amnesty law has been a big story this year as well. That has come into force, but continues to be a source of controversy now over who exactly it should apply to.
Now, I think this year, some of the top news stories have been related to extreme weather events, and it's making us realise just how vulnerable Catalonia could be in the face of climate change.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to remember now, perhaps, because in recent months we've had so much rain. But actually, on the 1st of February, the Catalan government officially declared a drought emergency in an area which included Barcelona and the metropolitan area that affected water supplies to 6 million people. The Catalan president at the time, Per Aragonès, he said that Catalonia was facing its worst drought in a century and, in fact, since rainfall records began.
Catalunya està patint la pitjor sequera del darrer segle. De fet, des de que es tenen registres en l'àmbit pluviomètric, no havíem afrontat mai una sequera tan llarga.
The most severe restrictions were lifted in May. So these were things like, you weren't able to fill swimming pools. There was a hosepipe ban, but there are still some restrictions in place for agriculture and for industry. But we're out of the state of emergency into what they call a state of exceptionality for now.
And we also had some extreme heat in August and most notably in April, I remember.
Yeah, it was a very warm spring. April, Barcelona temperatures almost reached 30 degrees. And in fact, some parts of Catalonia did surpass 30 degrees. So that's really unseasonably hot. We're getting used to now every year heat waves in July and August. And it was the same again. Almost 40 degrees in Barcelona. And over 43 degrees was a peak recorded in Alt Empordà, in the north of Catalonia. And a heat wave in the first 2 weeks of August, which were interrupted by a Dana. Now, at the time, I didn't know what a Dana was, but we've certainly know now because, of course, we had the Dana storm, which affected Catalonia a little bit in October, but obviously mainly Valencia and, caused over 220 fatalities.
And talking about the environment, 2024 has also brought big problems for agriculture in Catalonia, right?
Yeah, exactly. There were huge protests back in February from farmers. These tractor protests, they blockaded lots of the highways here, and they had a slow tractor march to Barcelona, filled Diagonal, one of the main big avenues here in Barcelona. And they were protesting. This wasn't just in Catalonia, it was across Spain and indeed Europe. And this was against excessive bureaucracy and the drought measures that were being brought in as well. They were saying they were severely hampering their work. And they were also complaining against what they called unfair competition from imports outside the EU. Now, the Catalan government did react. I mean, some changes, including actually changing the name of the department from Climate Action Department to the Department of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Climate Action, and other measures around bureaucracy as well. And then in recent days, we've seen a similar kind of protest in the fishing industry.
Yes, wasn't that to do with changes in the EU regulations?
Yeah, so there were some proposals to reduce the amount of fishing days to 27 a year. And, fishers were saying this is just going to make it impossible to do their job. But just this week, as we're recording it, there was a deal struck on trawling in the Mediterranean Sea by the European Union after Spain kind of pushed back the European Commission's initial stance.
I mean, of course, you can't get by working just 27 days a year.
No, you can't make a living.
I mean, it would be great, but no. And 2024 also saw the housing crisis worsen.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing story. It was really big this year, though, I have to say. A rent cap was introduced in March in Catalonia in 140 towns and cities, which affects 80% of the population. And it does seem as if we might be seeing some effects from that. In October, we got the news that rent prices in Catalonia fell between 3 and 5% in the first 2 quarters of 2024, which of course coincides with the implementation of rent caps. Mm-hmm. We've had big protests this year. Just in November, tens of thousands of people came out onto the streets of Barcelona to demand a reduction in rents and urgent measures to guarantee access to housing. Organisers called it the largest demonstration on housing ever held in the history of Catalonia. But it's probably not the protest that made the most headlines internationally. You might remember that in July there was an anti-tourism protest, which is kind of tied in with the housing crisis as well.
Exactly, that big backlash against tourism.
We saw that some of the protesters used water guns. They sprayed water guns at tourists, which of course then made international headlines and made a lot of people wonder, oh, can we not actually come to Barcelona now? The funny thing is that there was only a few thousand at that protest, whereas the big, huge one just in November doesn't seem to have resonated internationally as much, at least.
And also, didn't the mayor of Barcelona make a promise to remove all tourist apartments by 2028?
Yep, Barcelona currently has 10,000 legal tourist apartments, he said, and the city council's plan is for these 10,000 tourist apartments to be transformed into residential homes over the next 4 years.
And in the aftermath of the water gun gate, water pistols against tourists, didn't the tourism office change their slogan?
Yeah, I wonder, was it directly related? But Barcelona Tourism Office used to have a motto, Visit Barcelona, for the last decade. Now it's changed to This is Barcelona. So are they kind of saying they don't want everyone to visit? Well, they're saying that the focus is on quality tourism rather than just the quantity of visitors.
Okay, so tourism is still welcome, but not mass tourism.
Basically, if you come and spend a lot of money, you're going to be welcome. I think that's the nuts and bolts of it.
Okay, and then moving on to politics, it's been quite a big year.
Well, 2 elections. The first one came about because Pere Aragonès, the president at the time, called a snap election because his government's 2024 budget was rejected by Parliament. So he didn't get the support from other parties, mainly in this case from Comuns, who cited opposition to a macro project, this Hard Rock Hotel Casino.
El meu objectiu era esgotar la legislatura, però els vetos creuats entre els grups polítics del Parlament impedeixen tenir les condicions per fer-ho possible.
Okay, and what were the results?
The Socialist Party came out on top in the Catalan election. They won 42 out of 135 seats, so well short of a majority. And, we noticed at the time that if they were able to combine their votes with those of Esquerra Republicana, pro-independence party, and also with Comuns Sumar, a left-wing party, they would in total get 68 seats, which is exactly the threshold needed for a majority. And it took a few months of negotiation, but that's exactly what happened. Other big winners on the night were Aliança Catalana, a far-right pro-independence party, because they entered the Catalan parliament for the first time with 2 seats. It was a bad night for Esquerra, the governing party. They lost seats. And it was a good night for the Spanish Conservative Party, the PP, the People's Party.
And then, of course, we had the European elections in June.
Yeah, across the EU, Conservative parties had a very good night, and that was the case in Spain as well, where the People's Party were the top party with 22 seats, although not too far ahead of the Socialists, who won 20 seats. If we look at Catalonia in particular, the Socialists were the big winners. They topped the poll with 30% of the vote, which is a huge margin, considering Catalan politics is so divided and there's so many different parties. It wasn't a good night for Junts. It wasn't a good night for pro-independence parties in general. Junts, for example, they lost 2 of their 3 seats. Junts, of course, the party of former Catalan president Carles Puigdemont.
Yes, and speaking of Puigdemont, there's also been a lot of controversy this year about the amnesty law.
Yes, this has been one of the really big political stories that has run throughout the year. In June, the amnesty law was finally published, officially came into force, and courts then had 2 months to kind of decide on individual case-by-case basis when the amnesty would apply. So, for example, on the 1st of July, Spain's Supreme Court ruled that the crime of misuse of public funds was not included in the amnesty law. This meant that the arrest warrants for former President Carles Puigdemont and other exiled pro-independence leaders Toni Comín and Lluís Puig, those arrest warrants remain in force. On the other hand, several pro-independence figures residing in Switzerland did return to Catalonia after a case about this Tsunami Democratic protest group was dropped. So that included figures such as Esquerra Republicana leader Marta Rovira and the Esquerra MP Ruben Wagensberg, who crossed the border on July 12th.
5 Catalan pro-independence figures who had been living in exile in Switzerland have returned to Catalonia today. Among them, the most prominent was Marta Rovira, a key figure in the 2017 Catalan referendum.
I nosaltres només tenim les de guanyar i hem vingut aquí per acabar la feina que vam deixar a mitges. Hem vingut aquí per tornar a recomençar.
So that was going on over the summer, and at the same time there were talks to form the next Catalan government.
Yes, the key deal was between Esquerra and the Socialists, and it included changes to the financial model of Catalonia, basically the tax system, let the Catalan executive keep and manage 100% of taxes paid in Catalonia, and a new ministry for the Catalan language. So that meant that Esquerra, Comuns and the Socialists would all vote for Salvador Illa to become the new president of Catalonia on August the 8th. Now, Illa's investiture marks a significant turning point for Catalan politics, it has to be said. As a socialist, someone in favour of Spanish unity, this is the first president who holds that view since 2010. We've had a series of pro-independence presidents and a pro-independence majority, so quite a big change.
And of course, usually this would have been huge news, but I think at the time it was also somewhat overshadowed by the return of Puigdemont. Now, Lorcan, you weren't there at the time, but Gerard Escaich Folch was there and covered it. Gerard, what exactly happened?
Well, it was a huge surprise to everyone. Like, suddenly Puigdemont, who hadn't stepped foot, the former Catalan president, who hadn't stepped foot in Catalonia since 2017, appeared out of the blue, surrounded by dozens of people rushing towards the stage in Arc de Triomphe in early morning. And then after speaking for 5 minutes, everyone thought that he was going to walk to the Catalan parliament. In fact, police, Mossos d'Esquadra were ready for that. But he disappeared. We started to look around him for taking pictures and everything, but he was nowhere to be seen. And in fact, during the day, we all thought that he would appear out of the blue inside the parliament and in fact vote against Salvador Illa becoming president, but no, he didn't appear after all. And after a few days of uncertainty, 2 or 3 days later, we then learned that Carles Puigdemont was back in Belgium, and some police officers here in Catalonia were detained for helping him escape.
Thank you, Gerard, for reliving those memories with us. And we can't talk about 2024 in Catalonia without mentioning the Dani Alves rape case.
Yeah, this was a big legal case. We were all waiting for the result. Former FC Barcelona footballer was found guilty of rape by Barcelona court, sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. This was it was convicted of sexually assaulting a 23-year-old woman in a Barcelona nightclub.
Todos estamos satisfechos porque al final es una condena que reconoce lo que hemos sabido siempre, la verdad de la víctima y el sufrimiento que ha habido, con lo cual en ese aspecto debemos estar satisfechos y contentos.
Now, Alves' lawyer appealed the verdict, as did the prosecutors, who wanted a tougher sentence.
En este momento solo puedo deciros que vamos a recurrir la sentencia, que sigo creyendo y defendiendo la inocencia del señor Alves.
1 month later, he was released from prison after paying a €1 million bail. So although he's only served a quarter of his 4.5-year sentence, he's allowed out on bail. He had to surrender his passport, both his Brazilian and his Spanish passport. He's not allowed to leave Spain until we get his final sentence, so until the appeal is heard.
And staying with football news, but on a more positive note, we've also got Lamine Yamal, who's put Mataró on the map this year. He made history by becoming the youngest goal scorer in El Clásico at just 17 years old. He netted his 3rd goal against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. I find particularly amusing his salute. He does a sort of 304, which is the postcode of Rocafonda.
Yeah, that's his celebration when he scores. He does this 304 with his hands. And yeah, that's a tribute to the neighbourhood he grew up in. He was one of the stars of the Euros this summer. Spain, of course, defeated England 2-1 in the final, and thousands of fans gathered at giant screens set up in various Catalan cities. The biggest one here in Barcelona is Plaça Catalunya. And in other football news, Barça Femení won their second Champions League in a row. They beat Lyon 2-0. And the big story in men's football, men's club football in Catalonia this year, wasn't Barça, but little Girona, who qualified for the Champions League for the first time in their history.
Yeah, they had a really great season, a great year.
Catalan athletes won 7 medals in the Paris Olympic Games this summer. And the big sporting event then that took place in Barcelona this year was, of course, the America's Cup, which is kind of like Formula One, but with boats.
Great description.
Yeah, so Emirates Team New Zealand won the trophy for the third consecutive time. They defeated the British team Ineos Britannia in the final. The council said it was very positive for the economy, around 2.5 million spectators. But there was some opposition too. There were protests against gentrification, against the effect that the competition was having on rent increases. And also a lack of openness as to how much public money was being spent on the America's Cup. So those people that protested will be happy to know that the event isn't coming back to Barcelona for its next edition, which was something that was semi on the cards.
And of course, we can't close 2024 without talking about culture. I think it's been a very good year for cinema.
Great year for cinema. First, back in March, we had loads of Oscar buzz. 2 Catalan productions ultimately missed out on Academy Awards, but
they got nominated,
which is a fantastic achievement in itself.
And then, of course, we had El 47.
Yes, the 47, which refers to a bus route, that became the most watched film in the Catalan language of the last 40 years in Spanish cinemas. So a really great achievement. It's a film, we actually did a podcast about it. It tells the 1978 story of Manolo Vital, who was a bus driver who hijacked a bus and drove it to Torre Baró, a Barcelona neighbourhood where there was no public transport. A House on Fire was the big summer hit as well.
And then in terms of gastronomy, some Catalan restaurants, some bars and bakeries, I believe, have been voted the best in the world.
The Barcelona cocktail bar Sips was named the best in Europe. And Disfrutar, a restaurant in Barcelona, was named the best restaurant in the world.
And also I believe that one of our local restaurants has celebrated its 500-year anniversary.
That's just incredible, isn't it? The oldest restaurant in Catalonia. And, gastronomic scene is still going strong 500 years later, because in the new Michelin Guide, which was just announced a few weeks ago, 9 new restaurants in Catalonia were awarded a Michelin star for the first time. 2 restaurants did lose a star, but let's focus on the positives here.
Exactly. And a couple of curiosities before we finish. I believe that bears have been reintroduced into the Pyrenees, but have been causing some problems.
Yeah, back in May, we reported on a string of bear attacks on livestock in the Pyrenees. So sheep and goats, including a lamb that was in a fenced area. So it's causing a bit of controversy between conservationists who have been slowly reintroducing brown bears to the Pyrenees since 2014, and shepherds and farmers who say that the wild bears are becoming increasingly audacious in their attacks and say that there has to be a change in how they're managed.
And another notable news story this year is that Maria Brañas, who was the oldest woman, I believe, in the world, sadly passed away this year.
Yeah, the world's oldest person, Maria Brañas, she died aged 117. So she was actually born in San Francisco on the 4th of March 1907. She lived most of her life in Catalonia. She was born to a Catalan family in the United States. She lived through 2 world wars, the Spanish Civil War, COVID, of course, and even the Spanish flu epidemic a century before. And in fact, there are only 7 people who have been proven to have lived longer than Maria Brañas.
So that wraps up 2024. What's on the cards for the new year, Lorcan?
Well, no elections. Well, none scheduled anyway, although you never really know what's going to happen in politics in Spain and Catalonia. Montserrat Monastery is celebrating 1,000 years, this monastery, which forms a really big part of Catalan culture and history. So that's a big one to follow.
It'll also be the 50th anniversary of Franco's death.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that's marked.
And in 2024, we've seen unemployment reduce and also inflation has been low. Hopefully this will continue to happen in 2025.
Yeah, and another thing to look out for is Barcelona returning to the Camp Nou, which is expected to happen in February 2025.
That's an exciting football date to look forward to. And then we have concerts coming up in 2025, including world-famous names such as the Beach Boys, Robbie Williams, Guns N' Roses, Alanis Morissette, The Cause.
Yeah, always big festivals as well, like Primavera, Sonar. They're back again this year too.
Putting Barcelona on the music scene. Now, obviously, we can't include everything, and many important things have happened this year which we haven't had time to mention today. But the stories that we have featured provide a snapshot of our year and reveal some of the issues that are most relevant to Catalan citizens. That's almost all we have time for today. But before we go, it's time for our Catalan phrase of the week. Lorcan, what have we got today?
Anys i panys.
Anys i pans. That's years and locks, right?
Yeah, I think it's just because it rhymes, so it just means a long time. So you could say, oh, Beth, I haven't seen you in anys i pans. Haven't seen you in yonks.
Or Maria Brañas lived for...
She did live for anys i pans.
This week on Filling the Sink, we've been reviewing our top stories of 2024. Thank you to Lorcan Doherty and Gerard Escaich Folch for joining me here in the studio and wrapping up the year in style. We'll be back again next Saturday with another exciting episode of Filling the Sink. On behalf of all the team here at Catalan News, I'm Beth Cohen, wishing you a great weekend. Fins aviat. Adeu.